much for joining us. I'm Jason, your cruise host, and this is All Access Pass, and I am joined by one of the legends of this cruise, and I am so blessed and honored to have you here with me. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jason.
Linda Gail Lewis.
Thank y'all so much.
First and foremost, it is about time we had you on this cruise. We are so glad to have you.
I know, I really like this cruise a lot, and I think it's a good audience for me. I hope it is. Shouldn't take anything for granted.
I'm pretty sure this is going to be just fine for you.
I'm really happy about it, and I'm looking forward to tonight, and I'm happy to be talking to you and to some of the questions from the audience.
Hey, we got some questions. Before we jump into that, when you got the call and we said, hey, come join us for this cruise, what were your initial thoughts? What would you think you were getting yourself into?
When it said Malt Shop Memories, they had me at Malt Shop Memories.
And then when you walked on board yesterday, you looked around, you saw this rabid crowd, and how do you feel about it now? What do you think?
I think it's absolutely great, and I'm really happy to be here. It's an honor for me to get to do this cruise because it's the kind of music that I really love. You know, my husband and I, we have Sirius Radio, and we go back and forth from the 50s to the 60s. And you know, we're going back and forth on that.
I think you're in good company with that, yeah.
My husband promoted a lot of records in the 60s, and he wants to hear that, and I want the 50s stuff, so we go back and forth, and it's just great for me. I was sitting having lunch today, listening to all the wonderful music that's playing, all my favorite songs, and yeah, it's great.
I gotta ask, when you're on Sirius Radio and you're switching around and you hear maybe your brother or somebody like that on, what's it like to hear you or your brother on Sirius Radio?
Well, it's always my favorites when I hear a whole lot of shaking going on.
Sure.
Great Balls of Fire and Breathless and my brother's High School Confidential from the movie, and that's my favorites. I mean, I can't help it. I appreciate and love everybody, but I love him the best.
As you should, as you should. I know you recently lost your beloved brother, and I don't want to go into that just yet. I would like to ask you a little bit of a warm-up question, which is, tell us a little bit about growing up a member of the Lewis family.
I've had many people ask me that, and you know, it's hard for me to say what it could have been like with somebody else because, you know, I only had one brother, and my one brother was Jerry Lee Lewis. But I can tell you that he was absolutely wonderful to us. He was so kind and so thoughtful. We was living in an old sharecropper shack down the road, way down the road from Faraday, Louisiana, because Daddy wanted to farm. He wanted to farm again, and then the only way that he could farm was to be a sharecropper. So we had to move in that old house, and we had to take a bath in a tin tub, and we had to go outside to go to the restroom, and it was rough. It was pretty rough living there. And as soon as my brother got his first check from Sam Phillips, he moved us into town, into a beautiful brick home filled with beautiful furniture, and gave us money to go shopping, to have clothes. We were so poor. Thank y'all. We were so poor, my mama had 2 dresses. One dress to wear to church and one dress to wear at home. That was all she had. So he gave us $1,000, and we went to Doris's dress shop in Faraday, Louisiana, because he moved us away from that river. We were in town. And we went to that, and those people had never seen $1,000, and neither had we. And we went in there and we bought everything they had in our sizes. It was one of those old-timey stores. They had clothes for the mama, clothes for the girls, the young girls. And we went in there and bought our beautiful new clothes, and it was absolutely the time of my life. I mean, that was so exciting to be leaving where we were and to going there.
Kind of an I made it feeling, or our family made it feeling.
Listen,
sure.
It was when he brought us up to Memphis, you know, and put us in that beautiful Holiday Inn, and we went swimming in the swimming pool. It's kind of like, you know, the Beverly Hillbillies in the cement pond.
I was going to say that.
It was so nice to not have to walk into that lake in the mud to get out to where the water was so we could swim. I thought, well, this is the most wonderful thing in the world. And of course, we were going out to eat in Memphis, and oh, it was just the thrill of our lives. He was really good to us.
How did he get started? Forgive me, I'm going to focus a little bit on your brother. How did he even get started in it to allow your family to, or to help your family, I should say,
He was a genius. He was a genius when he was a small child. He could just sit down at the piano and play it. And that happened because
by ear. He was playing by ear.
Oh, definitely. My mom and daddy took him to my aunt's house, and she had bought her daughter, Norma Jean, a piano. And she was supposed to learn how to play it. And it was my Aunt Eva. And Aunt Eva said to my mom and daddy, she said, Norma Jean is never going to play this piano. And then Jerry, of course, was a small child, and he just walked right up to that piano and started playing it. And my daddy and my mama said, well, we have to have that piano. And my daddy carried that piano down a flight of stairs. It was a big upright piano. It's in the Smithsonian. I think it's there. Or maybe, no, I'm sorry. It's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Jerry had a real spot in his heart for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame because he was one of the first inductees. Sure. That's where it is. And yeah, Daddy carried it down those stairs. They took it home. And Jerry could just play it, and he played it all the time. And when I was born, he was 12. And so by the time I was born, he was really playing it. And he would do talent shows and get standing ovations and stuff, and people wanted encores at a talent show. And of course, he won the talent shows. But it was absolutely wonderful what he did with he spent his time singing and playing. He didn't go out and do a lot of other things. He was very dedicated.
Even as a child?
Even as a child.
As a little guy.
Yes.
And when did that start to rub off on you? When did you realize music was part of your future as well?
I just loved my brother so much, and you know, I loved listening to him play and sing. And I'd stand by that piano for hours and listen to him from a small child up to being an adult. And of course, I was still listening to him when he invited me to be on the road with him. They didn't know what else to do with me because I got married when I was real young, and Jerry said, what are we going to do with you? So he took me on the road with him, and I was on stage with him one night, and we were supposed to be singing a duet. Well, we were singing a duet, but I was watching him play the piano, and I forgot to come in and sing my part. And he stopped and and on the microphone so everybody could hear. He said, are you in this show or are you just watching it?
Nothing like a big brother on stage.
I said, to be honest, I was watching. He said, don't do that again. So I didn't. I sang my part next time.
And when did you start playing the piano?
I started playing the piano when I was real young, but just a little bit. And I didn't know anything at all about playing rock and roll and boogie woogie. But I kind of got kicked out of my brother's band when I was like 40. And I said,
what does one have to do at 40?
Everybody said, they said, you know, you can't do this. You're old and you're overweight. And I said, well, just watch me. I'm going to have to do this if I want to eat. It's the only thing I know how to do. So I had to really work hard to develop my piano style at the age of 40.
So at 40, you were really developing.
Well, I could play the chords and stuff, but I had to really remember. And God blessed me that I was able to remember the things that my brother showed me on the piano.
Sure.
He showed me several things, and I'll never forget what he'd say. He'd say, now, Linda, I'm going to show this to you one time, but don't ask me to show you again. You better get it the first time.
Sometimes tough love works, I'm pretty sure.
It worked for me.
What actually leads me in, and forgive me, I believe this says Andre from New York. Forgive me if I mispronounced your name. I can't quite read the writing. He said, funny enough, do you actually play the piano with your feet?
Sometimes.
I'm sure that's one of the things he showed you, right?
Not exactly, but you know, I did that one time because somebody asked me to do it. And you know, I did a project with Van Morrison, and we were on tour together for a year.
Yes.
And Van just loved it when I would play the piano with the heel of my shoe. And he would say, now do that tonight and do it a lot, you know. So,
keep doing it.
So I got used to doing it on that tour, and that was, I think that was in 1990-something. Yeah, it was 1999 until the year 2000.
Yeah. And we're going to kind of jump around. I'm going to open that door since you opened it. Van Morrison is a musical legend as well.
Oh, he is.
How did that connection happen? Tell us a little bit about that combination.
He wanted to do an album with my brother, and Jerry just didn't have time to do it and never did it. So I was in Wales doing a gig, and he came to that gig. And he just decided from watching me and listening to me on that gig that he wanted to do the album with me.
That's fantastic. He's notoriously pretty quiet too, pretty reserved in terms of his outgoing presence. You know, often when bookers try to book Van Morrison, it's not the simplest thing in the world to get.
And he can be quite grumpy.
I wasn't going to say that much, but yes, thank you.
And I picked up on that at my gig. Because my husband said to him, you know, I promoted your song, Brown Eyed Girl. He said, well, you know, Bang Records didn't pay me. And so that didn't go well.
Nice chat, sir. Yeah.
So my agent asked me the next day, he said, would you like to have dinner with me and Van Morrison? I said, no. He said, I think he wants to do a project with you, and you could make quite a bit of money from that. And I've always been a starving, struggling artist ever since I started my career when I was 40. And when my agent said that to me, I said, okay, what time is dinner?
Dinner it is. And so you guys toured for a little over a year, you said?
It was about a year.
Yeah. And how was that tour? Was it as much fun behind the scenes as one would hope it would be?
It was, until I gave my notice, because, you know, Van's music is different from mine.
Very.
And I'll admit it, because of my ego, I learned a lot of his songs, probably 150. And I was tired of doing that, because I like to play rock and roll.
Yeah.
And I like to play country. 3-chord stuff. and at that time, I was doing quite a few gigs in the UK, and people would come out and they would dance, and it was so much fun, and I missed that for that year. So I gave my notice, and Van wasn't quite ready for me to give my notice. And you know, he's like a lot of musical legends. He's spoiled. He used to have it his way. So yeah, he got mad at me then. And so about the last month or so, it wasn't a very good trip.
Not quite as pleasant as it was before.
It wasn't great after that.
Well, I'm assuming though you are happy you did it, at least at the at the end of the day.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, it's wonderful music.
Van Morrison is a genius.
He is.
He is an absolute genius, and it helped me so much with my piano skills.
Sure.
Because I had to learn things that were more complicated. I know I did a recording session right after I got back, and from that year, I did the session, and I was playing it for my husband, and my husband said, well, who is that playing the piano? I said, well, honey, that's me. Because I was 10 times better playing piano after I worked with Van than I was before. And he helped me so much because he gave me confidence. He'd say, now, Linda, we're going to do this jazz version of Moon Dance. And Van, I can't play that. He said, oh, yes, you can. It'll be fine. And I believed him.
It is amazing. Exactly. It is amazing what confidence can do for a performer. That is often, I mean, there are so many incredibly talented people in this world, but being up here is very difficult. It's very hard to have eyeballs on you.
It can be.
What was your moment when you figured out you could be on stage in front of folks, not without your brother, without Van, without other, just you, just Linda Gail?
Well, you have to pay the bills, you have to live, and I don't know how to do anything else except music. So I started out in Memphis with my solo career, not playing the piano. There was a guy playing the piano who was very, very good at playing the piano, but he playing stuff like Whole Lot of Shaking Going On. And I knew enough to show him that one lick on Whole Lot of Shaking Going On that he wasn't playing. And I said, can you just play this? Da, 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 da. He said, I could if I wanted to, but I don't want to play that. I said, okay, I'll play it myself. I'll be the piano player in the band. And they all laughed at me. And I will admit, I probably wasn't great, when I first started playing, but I worked really hard on it. And I'd go hang out at Hernando's Hideaway in Memphis and sit in with the band. I said, y'all, please let me sit in. I got to learn this. And then I started playing piano in my act, and I became a better singer when I was playing when I was singing. Yeah. And I had so many wonderful Jerry Lee Lewis fans who would come and see me, and Elvis fans, when they were in Memphis, they would come and see me. So I just learned a whole bunch of Elvis songs and a whole bunch of Jerry Lee Lewis songs, and I just kept rocking.
And as you got better and better and really started to elevate your own career, what was your brother's influence then, when you were no longer a little kid on tour, but as you're becoming your own star? Tell us a little about your relationship.
Well, I was really insecure about doing that first tour.
I can imagine.
And I had this gig in Newport, Wales, and that was going to be my first tour, not on tour with my brother, playing piano and singing in Europe. And so, you know, my brother always kind of knew when I needed him, and and he came into Hernando's Hideaway where I had a gig. And I said, I'm so glad you're here because I'm going to Europe and I'm very nervous about it. And he said, well, get on up there. Let me see what you got. And
Trial by fire. Here we go.
I went on up there and I did my gig. And after the gig was over, he said, you'll be fine over there. They'll love you. And I went and everything was fine.
You know, I think it is, I'm going to say this as delicately as possible. I know you and I talked backstage, and you are very, very open, and I love you for that.
Maybe too open.
Many folks in the room, myself included, know your brother as sometimes being difficult, for lack of better words. It could be a little bit abrasive at times. But to hear you get emotional and to hear you tell some of those stories from the inside, I think is very refreshing. And I hope I speak for people out here because, you know, some of his interviews were not as much fun as some of us.
Horrible interviews. He never did good interviews.
He could be a little tough.
He made me do a lot of them because he just didn't like people asking him questions. And I said, but Jerry, you're famous and people want to know. You know, they're going to ask you. And he said, well, I don't like it. I don't want to talk about it.
Well, it's wonderful to hear the other side of Jerry Lee Lewis.
He was so good to us.
He
was so good to us. You know, we didn't have a telephone or anything like that. So he had my aunt come and get us, bring us out to her house so he could talk to Mama and Daddy. And when my mama answered that phone call after he'd gotten that money, that first check that he got, $40,000, which is about $250,000 in today's money, he was so excited about it. And he told Mama, he said, you know, Mama, I've got a hit record. I'm doing well now. But I want to make sure that you know that I'm going to share everything that I have with you and Daddy and Linda Gail and Frankie Jean. And he did that. He shared with us.
It's just so wonderful. It's you hear of celebrities making it and then gone into the wind, and it's wonderful to hear that someone didn't.
But Jason, he also took care of us when he couldn't afford to. When the scandal happened, and he went from making $10,000 a night to making $200 a night, he still took care of us. And he always put us first. And that may be why my ex-sister-in-law hated us so much, because she had to move from her house in Memphis to our home in Faraday because Jerry couldn't pay the bills in both houses.
Two houses.
He said, well, I got to pay bills from my family, so you're going to live with them. And, of course, we tried to be as good to her as we possibly could. But she always resented that, and probably still does. But that's how much he wanted to make sure we had everything that we needed. And then, of course, he went on the road, and he went around the circuit, and he went pretty quickly from making $200 a night to $2,000 a night because he was just so great on stage, and people wanted to hear him and wanted to come back again and again.
Even with Scandal, you can't erase that. You know, you can't erase what made the man what he was. You can't take away from that.
Well, and he had so many careers. I mean, he had that career, and then he had his career in country music a little bit later on, and he really had a lot to offer. But he was funny because we'd go in, and you know, he didn't like people telling him what to do. And the promoter would say, "Now, Jerry Lee, don't do much rock and roll tonight because there's a lot of people here that like your country hits. You need to do a lot of country music." And he said, okay. I swear, he went out there and he played maybe one or two country songs. The rest of it was all rock and roll.
Just out of spite at that point, I'm sure.
It would really have been better if they hadn't said it.
Exactly.
And then it would be the other way around. If they said, oh, we only want to hear rock and roll, then he'd do all country. Yeah, both of those things happen.
So obviously, I mentioned in the beginning, then I'd like to move on more to your career, but you're so gracious to talk about your brother. You did lose him recently.
Yes, darling.
And
that was the hardest thing. And you know, Jason, I just didn't think I was going to be able to make it. It affected me so much. I thought he'd live to be at least in his 90s because he had lived past that stroke. He got over the stroke and he was still doing okay. And I thought the fact that he was still alive meant that he was going to be alive a long time because, you know, he partied more than all of the Rolling Stones put together. So the fact that he was
I don't
still
feel like she's
here,
exaggerating, for the record.
the fact that he was still here, that made me think that, okay, he'll be 100, you
Sure.
know. And it didn't happen that way, and I was quite shocked by it. And, but I've told many people I was pretty naive to be shocked when somebody, you know, that's, like I said, lived that kind of life and they're 87 years old and they pass away.
Yes, ma'am.
How could I be shocked by that? But I was. Yeah, it knocked me to my knees. It did.
Do you find yourself listening to his records very often, or going down memory lane, or is it still too fresh?
It's a little too fresh. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know. I heard someone doing one of our songs that we did on our gospel album, and I thought, well, I can listen to this because it's not Jerry and it's not me. But I got like a little into it and I started crying. I said, no, I can't do it yet. I have to wait a while.
The good news is you have that. You do have a portal, almost, you know, to your relationship with him and back in time, and to your brother. You have a lot of that, those memories, whether it's on TV or whether you have the actual songs themselves.
Oh, yes, and I have wonderful memories, and I have the opportunity. I'm blessed with the opportunity to share my memories with my audiences, and I do a tribute show to my brother, and that's most of the time what we do. And even when we're not doing the tribute show, we're still doing the tributes.
Sure, of course.
and I'm, you know, listening to his music sometimes a little bit, but I can't listen to the gospel songs for sure. But when I'm in the car and they're playing Great Balls of Fire on the radio, my husband and I are, you know, we're old, but we're kind of bouncing around in our car anyway. We love it when Great Balls of Fire and a lot of shaking going on comes on the radio. But it's wonderful that I just kind of feel like he's with me in a way because I'm doing so much that's about him.
Well, and you're doing a lot of things that he either helped guide or taught you possibly, and probably, you know, and helped you, give you the confidence to do a lot of these things. So he's got to be a big part of every time you walk on stage.
Well, he was very happy when I told him I was doing a tribute album to him. Because, you know, I don't think he liked a lot of my songs that I recorded in the past. Because you know, the last few albums I did one of his songs on it. And at first I thought, well, maybe he won't like that. But I'd say, which song did you like best on that album, Jerry? And he'd say, oh, I liked Rockin' My Life Away. That's the best song on that album. And the same thing with the Robbie Fulks album. I did Boogie Woogie Country Man. Oh, that's the best song. That's a hit. So when I told him I was doing 12 of his songs, he was very happy. And especially when I told him we were doing it at Sun Studios in Memphis, where he recorded most of those a lot of those hits.
That's very cool. I didn't realize that. That's amazing.
Yeah, we were going
That's a
into
full circle moment.
Well, it is, and you know, it's sad that I didn't ever get to play it for him. But I think he knows. And he was just tickled when I told him I was doing 12 of his songs. And you know, we were so rushed because we had to do everything real live on the floor. Because that's a museum.
Yeah.
You can only record for a few hours at night. And we got so excited and so stressed out, we did 13 songs instead of 12.
One more time.
Yeah. But it was wonderful.
Now, you are not the only talented Lewises. You have a couple of kiddos of your own that are quite talented, that, matter of fact, have toured with you and play with you.
I am so blessed. And my daughter is so talented, and I love having her with me. I love her voice, and she sings with me. And, of course, she can play a lot of instruments, but she doesn't want to. And, you know, she's young and beautiful, and I can understand that. I stood up on stage with my brother, too, when I was young and beautiful. But as you get older, sometimes you need to play some instruments and stuff. I have to do everything I can. And then, of course, I'm just really blessed that my daughter fell in love with and married my son-in-law, because he's been the biggest help to me. Next to my brother, Jerry Lee Lewis, he's helped my career more than anyone has.
Elaborate. That's beautiful. Elaborate.
Oh, well, you know, he's written songs for me. He's gotten album deals for me and gotten albums recorded. He's my favorite guitar player. He's a wonderful guitar player. And, of course, he plays piano, too, but I've asked him not to.
Yeah, he probably shouldn't.
Don't do that. But he's just really, really talented, and we work really well together. And I'm so blessed to have him in my life and have him to work with me.
And you've toured with both your daughters. You performed with both your daughters, but you were mentioning backstage that a little more with one than the other.
Well, my older daughter, you know, and she looks just like me. She is the one child. I have 4, and she's the one that looks just like me. But, you know, I love her to death. And it's really hard, though, when the three of us are trying to sing together. But we still do sometimes, you know. We got together recently and sang together. But we did an album together, Lewis 3 album. Yeah. We called ourselves the Lewis 3. My brother didn't like it much. He said, well, I could do an album with you too, and I could be in the album, and it could be me, you, and Annie, because Annie was always his favorite niece. Oh. He said that then we'll be the Lewis 3. But yeah, we did that album together. It was a lot of fun, and we tried to do a tour, but we couldn't get along.
Family's tough. Family is tough.
It was probably my fault.
That's a good mother right there. That's taking the blame, taking the bullet for the whole family.
But my daughter Annie is so humble and so sweet, and my daughter Mary Jean is a lot like me, and she's not. We go on stage together, the three of us. I'm looking at Mary Jean, and Mary Jean's looking at me. And one night she's doing this dancing thing, this clogging thing that she learned how to do, and she can really do that, you know. But then I decided she was stealing the show from me, and I got up and I started clocking. But here's the thing, I don't know how to clock.
I was just going to say.
It was the funniest thing you've ever seen. And even her best friend that was there turned on her because he was watching me and he was laughing until he cried. So
no competition in the Lewis family at all, I'm sure.
Those kind of things don't work out. But it never was like that with me and my brother. I always knew that he was the greatest, he was the best, he was the one, and I was just happy that I could be there with him.
And that shows. I mean, your reverence towards him shows, and it's beautiful. And I appreciate you for being so open and honest with us about that.
It's my pleasure.
It's wonderful to hear. You know, we often get a lot of stories out here, and I'm blessed to interview a lot of celebrities, and not often do they have such wonderful stories about famous relatives and brothers and sisters or family members of any kind.
I love sharing stories about my brother.
That's fantastic. I know we enjoy hearing them. I mean, there's a lot of folks that, you know, yeah.
My son-in-law, he said it's holding court, but sometimes I'll be with some Jerry D. Lewis fans, and we'll sit there for hours, and I'm just talking and talking and talking.
And you know, that's one of the things that, and Jerry Blavitt, who's no longer with us, we used to talk all the time, and one of the great aspects of this cruise is the all-access pass, because it's a chance, you know, we get to see the artists on stage, right, and we're all used to seeing so-and-so up here doing their thing, and we don't often get to sit, and I'm talking about in life, not just on the cruise, we don't often get to sit for a few minutes and get to know someone a little better, get to know the personal angle, you know, and have a conversation with someone that's deeper than just, what do you want to hear next? You know, it's wonderful, and I really appreciate you being with us. Before I let you go, you do have some family members on board. Matter of fact, some of the folks you're talking about. Who's on board with you?
Well, I have my daughter and my son-in-law, Danny and Annie.
They're hiding in the back. They're right there in the back.
You can't miss Annie. She's wearing a Linda Gail Lewis t-shirt.
Represent, Annie. I like it.
Oh, I see them now.
Yeah, they're right directly in the back.
Yeah, they're back there at the bar. They're going to have a bar tab that's probably $900.
Just for today, right? Just for today. Yeah, it's a long cruise.
And that'll just be for today.
Yeah. Now, you're performing for us tonight, I believe, is your first show. Is that correct?
I'm excited about that. I'm looking forward to that.
And what can folks look forward to seeing at your show tonight?
Well, I'm going to do some of my songs and some songs that I wrote and one song that Danny wrote, but I'm doing a lot of Jerry D. Lewis rock and roll as well, a tribute to my brother as well. And we're just going to rock it out and have a great time.
I absolutely love that.
I want everybody to have a great time.
Oh, they will.
I don't want to take anything for granted, but I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that everybody has a good time.
One of the very best things about the Malt Shop Cruise, and I mentioned this last night briefly in the show, and I'll mention it to you now before we let folks run, you will never have in one place for an entire week a more dedicated, music-loving, artist-fan type of crowd. And the respect and the love from the guests towards you as the artist is really one of my absolute favorite things about this cruise. So you being any level of concerned about what's going to happen tonight, you can erase that now. And I'll say it like your brother said it. You're going to be just fine in this venue.
Well, thank you so much, Jason. Thank you. Thank y'all so much. I was talking to your lovely wife, Brittany, and we were talking about that little bit of nervousness that you get when you're going to perform. And I said, but you know, if you get to where you don't have that at all, then you don't care.
Yeah.
But I do. I care. And I appreciate every person that comes in to hear me.
You're fantastic. I am so grateful that you were my first interview on the Malt Shop Memories Cruise. I want to thank you so much for your time, your openness, and your emotion and your honesty. It's beautiful, and I very, very much appreciate it.
Well, Jason, it'll be all down here from here.
My friends and family, do me a favor. Let's give a huge round of applause to Miss Linda Gail Lewis.
Thank you so much for joining us, everybody. Have a great day. We'll see you after that.